It's Catherine Frankie. It's May 13th, and we got some good news this week. Rumeysa Öztürk, the tough student who was abducted off the street in a very frightening way by ICE officials and put into detention in Louisiana, and really was suffering serious health consequences there by not getting the medical treatment she needed. A judge in New Jersey ordered that she be released, pending the ongoing litigation around whether her constitutional rights were violated by virtue of her being detained. So that's great. And of course, Mohsen Madawi, the Columbia student who was being held up in Vermont, was released from detention through a habeas proceeding there as well, about 10 days ago. So in a way, we have much to celebrate. But on the other hand, what about Mahmoud Khalil, the first student who was jumped basically and kidnapped by federal government officials and put into detention down in Louisiana as well? His lawyers have also brought a habeas petition in New Jersey, alleging that his First Amendment rights to free speech and political action and his due process rights have been violated in his case, and yet the judge has denied the request to have him released pending the adjudication of those cases. So why is his case somehow different, and in some ways so compelling, given that his wife just gave birth? Well, let me just say a little bit of background about his case. So Mahmoud's case was first. So the judge in this case was writing on a blank slate, right? The political climate here is changing week by week by week. And as things are trending in a direction of perhaps more judicial checks on illegal government action, when Mahmoud was taken, there had been no judge that had ruled on these issues yet. So he was the first. His name is Judge Michael Farbiars. He was appointed to the bench after serving for a while as the general counsel of the Port Authority of New York, the quasi-government body that oversees the bridges and tunnels and waterways of New York. But before that, more importantly, he was a prosecutor for 10 years or so with the Southern District of New York, so the Manhattan Federal Prosecutor's Office, co-leading that office's terrorism team or task force. So he has a long history as a prosecutor, prosecuting terrorism cases, and the government is appealing to that history that he brings to this case. So the judge asked the government about a week ago, what other examples can you produce where this statute, this part of the law that's being used in Mahmoud's case would justify putting him into deportation proceedings? And the language of that statute says that someone is deportable because his presence, according to the Secretary of State, who has reasonable grounds to believe, would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States. And we were all a little shocked that you would say this about students. But the judge said to the government, all right, when else has this provision been used as a justification to deport someone who's otherwise legally present in the United States, as was the case with these students? And the government just filed a letter the other day saying, okay, 7 incidents, 7 times that we can find where this provision of law has been invoked. 3 of them were in 1995. The first had to do with a Haitian man, a Haitian national, who was a co-founder and leader of a illegitimate paramilitary group in Haiti that had been accused of engaging in human rights violations. The second was a Mexican national, also in 1995, who had been a high-ranking police officer who was being criminally prosecuted for crimes in Mexico. And to the extent that we were in an effort to enforce drug laws cooperatively with Mexico, made sense, they said, to deport him. The third was in 1997 of a Palestinian leader, they said, of Hamas, who had already, through a legal process, been designated in the United States as what's called a specially designated terrorist, on the basis of what the government said were 10 cases where they had probable cause to believe that this person had engaged in acts of terrorism. And then fast forwarding to 2004, there was a Somali national who had engaged in violent political activity, they said, in Somalia, thereby undermining the U.S. foreign policy interests in promoting democracy in Somalia. And then these last 2 cases, Mohsen and Mahmoud. So the government is lumping our students who are engaging in peaceful political speech that the government doesn't like, but speech, in with people who've been shown to be terrorists or engaged in other kinds of violent activity elsewhere. And the claim in Mahmoud's case and in Mohsen's case is that they were promoting Hamas-based propaganda, which I can tell you for sure is not true, but also that they were creating a hostile learning environment for Jewish students. And there are Jewish students who have felt that the discussions of Palestinian dignity and rights, it makes them uncomfortable. And so that should be adjudicated on its own. But that doesn't put them, either of them or any of these students, in the same class as these other people, these other 5 people I've mentioned, where this special law was invoked as a ground to deport someone who was otherwise here legally. So we'll see what this judge does as he now sees that the trend is towards releasing students, and whether he will revisit the decision to hold Mahmoud in Louisiana when the other students are being released.